Welcome to our share, Parshas Va'era, Tafshin Pei Aleph. And it's something special happened yesterday. It was Rosh Chodesh Shvat. That was the 50th yard site of my Zayda, the Ozher of a Rebbe, Rabbi Moshe Yechiel Halevi Epstein, the Mechaber of the Ber Moshe and the Eish Das. Two wonderful, wonderful stories. The Ber Moshe is 12 volumes, including on all of the Torah and including Yeshua, Shoftim, Shmuel, and Malachim, as well as the 11 volumes of Eish Das, total of 23 volumes. I think the smallest one is about 600 pages. And the Rebbe, Schus Yagen Aleinu, was almost blind in his old age, and he dictated the Svarim. He did it all from memory. It comes out to, I think, something like 12,000 pages altogether of Torah. I mean, Kala Torah Kula, and he mamish did that. And it was a big schus to be an einikel to such a great man. I had the schus of seeing him one time. I'll just tell you the story because it's an interesting story. That when I was 15 years old, the Rabbi came. He lived in Eretz Yisrael. He came to America, to New York. And at that time, I was learning in Telz Yeshiva in Chicago, and the Rosh Yeshiva, my Rosh Yeshiva, Rav Amr Chaim Levin, Zecher Tzadik Livrocha, called me over, and he said, Reb Labish, I want you to go to New York for a week, and I want you to learn by your Zayd. He's a great man, and you should learn from him. And Yeshiva was a big tumult, because to give a week off from Yeshiva, it wasn't such a pashut a thing, and it wasn't even that I asked him. The Rosh Yeshiva called me over and told me to go. And then that at Schus, I was able to go. I have the tremendous hakaras hatov to Rosh Yeshiva, that because I was able to go to New York and to meet my Zayda. In those days, you went by train. And you took a train and you went to New York. And I stayed there for a week, and I taka was shayiv from him. And I always wondered, my Rosh Yeshiva is a Litvish yeshiva, and the Zayda was in Chicago, and the Zayda was Chassidus Rebbe in Eretz Yisrael. And where did it come, the two together? How did he know of his godless? How did he know of it? And then I found out that about a year ago it occurred to me, and that suddenly I got a blitz, and it occurred to me that what happened is the Rosh Yeshiva Rabbi Chaim Levin was an einikel. His wife was a granddaughter of Reb Chatzkel Levenstein, the great mashgiach of Ponevezh Yeshiva. And in his shmuzim, he always used to talk about the Zayder Reb Chatzkel soll gesund sein. Remember all his shmuzim. Zayder Reb Chatzkel soll gesund sein. And Reb Chatzkel was very close to my Zayda. And he spoke about him, and he said his Sfarim are Sifrei Musar. In Chassidus, but they're Sifrei Musar. And therefore, Reb Chatzkel must have spoken to Zaynikl and told him about it. And that's how I came to be Zoiche, to meet my Zayda, the Heiliger Ozher of a Rebbe, 50th yard site, Rosh Chodesh Shvat, Schus Yagen Aleinu. And Yetz Hashem, if I have time, and Kayach will maybe tell over some stories at a different time. Maisim, some amazing Maisim, and Maisim Mamish from the Rebbe. So let's talk a little bit about the Sedra. And of course we have the Makkos. And in this parsha we have the Makkos, the Tzvardoyim, we have the Makkah of the frogs. And it's very interesting, because wondering what's the pshat, what's the lesson, what's the midah keneged midah that we learn out from them. And in Pasuk Chav Ches, the Pasuk tells us, "V'sharetz ha'yor tzvardim," it will come out. Hashem, when He's giving the tzivui, He says, "Will come out frogs from the Nile, from the Taich, v'olu, and they'll come where?" And it lists a number of places where these frogs will come. B'veisecha, in your house, means your palace, you Paro. V'chadar mishkavecha, and where you sleep. Okay, umitecha, valmitecha, mitosecha, and on your bed, uveis avdecha, in the house of your servants, uvamecha, and the people, uvasanur, and in the sanurecha, and in the ovens, umisharosecha, and the kneading troughs when you knead the dough. So I was thinking, where does all this come? Why? So we know that we always talk about the Sfardoim in terms of the Mesiras Nefesh, that says they went into the Tanur, and they're Meiser Nefesh to go in the Tanur. We learn Mesiras Nefesh from it. I'd like to learn something, say something perhaps different. And to do that, I'd like to share with you something I saw in the Masakor in Parshas Shemais in last week's Parsha, on the episode of Moshe meeting the daughters of Yisrael. and eventually marrying, finding his basher to Zivig at Tzipora. And it says over here, it says, if you take a look all the way back in Parshas Shmos, on page 155, Pasuk Chav, Perek Beis, it says, Vayomer el b'naisav, Yisro says to his daughters, Va'ayo, when they come in breathlessly, right? There's an Egyptian man, and he helped us with the well, and he poured the water, they tell him the chesed. It says, Ayo, lama ze azavtem. Why'd you leave him outside? As he says, why didn't you tell him? Karolach, you should call him in. V'yachal let him eat bread. So Pashup Pshat is that Yisro tells them, what's going on? You didn't do, you didn't do Achnas Zorachim. Bring him in, they'll eat bread. So Rashi interprets it, instead of the Pashup Pshat, Rashi says, Shema Yisachemem. Maybe he'll marry one of you. What is that? Marry one of you? What does that got to do with anything? Where did Rashi get? How did Rashi understand this inyan? If the Pasuk said Yaichel Lechem, Pashup Pshat, he's offering Achnasas Archim. Come on in. And Rashi says no, he wants to instead he wants to say he wants to marry one of you. So how do we understand that? So he brings to the Sefer Chazon Yeshayahu that there was a mashal. There was a gvir, very rich man. He was a terrible kamtzen. He was terribly cheap. And he hated all the schnorrers, all the poor people that came to his door. I shouldn't use that word, but to him they were. And that came to his door, and he used to reject them all, and he closed the door on them. He was nasty to them. Maybe give them a kopik, a few things. No, anyway, he had 7 daughters. And when it came time to marry them off, so he found a nice shidduch for them in another city. And they were going to have a chasana. One day, one of the anim that he had rejected happens to be by the new mechutin. And he eats by him. And in conversation, where are you from? In some Jewish geography, he says, where are you from? He says, I'm from that city. Ooh, that city, that's where mechutin's from. So what do you think? You know my mechutin? Do you know him? He goes, yeah, he's a very fine person. But his daughters, there's something wrong with all his daughters. They're all malei mumim. They're not so good. He goes, really? I didn't know that. And he goes and he breaks the shidduch. And our rich anti-hero, our villain, the rich man who's the kamsen, who's the cheapie, who won't give any money. So what does he do? He's very tzibrochen, but what can he do? He tries again. And he has 2 daughters get engaged. After all, he's a rich man, and everyone's running after rich man shidduchim. Soon enough, surely the same thing happens. Some poor people that he had rejected go to these mechutanim, and they bashmutzim. And the shidduchim are broken. So he doesn't know what to do, so he asks a friend of his. He says, I'll tell you what you should do. You got to become the nicest guy in the world. You got to build yourself your reputation back. Every ani that comes, give him a nice meal. He'll come, they're going to sing your praises. They're going to come, your daughters, sehr geschmack. So he says, you're right. Okay, I guess I'll have to swallow hard, and I'll do it. So he swallows hard, and he becomes known as one of the most generous people around. Everybody comes to his door, is sent away, like with Molly Kreisai, they're full, the geschmack, everything's good. In the meantime, he goes back to marrying off his 7 daughters, and bingo! It works beautifully. All 7 daughters get married, and everything is geschmack. He's so happy. He finishes the last Sheva brachas. He comes home. He's now an empty nester. The next morning, the aniyim say, come back to his door, and now we finish Sheva brachas. Go back to him. So what do you do? He slams the door in their face. They go, what? For the last 10 years, you've been like the nicest guy in the world. What happened? He says, I had to marry off my daughters. As soon as I married them off, I didn't need to be nice anymore. Now I'm back to who I really am. Nebuch. That's the mashal. He says a gewaltige pshat. Mamsha mayudige pshat by light. He says by light, what does it say by light? It says, Vayomer, and Yomer says, Al Noachai. Right? They come, they surround his house. And he says to them, Al Noachai Tereu, don't be afraid. Don't be worried. Don't be nervous. Hinei, no lish te banais, shachal liyadu asish. I have 2 daughters that were never married. So everybody says, very strange. What? They're coming to besieging his house. He should be protecting his daughters. And instead he's telling him, I have 2 daughters that were never married. So he says the same thing. Lot was telling him, I'm in Sodom. In Sodom you have to be very not nice to Orchim. That's part of the Sodom legacy, right? It's sort of like, the cities that want to keep the Yidden out, Rahman al-Islam, and they say, we don't let in Orchim, we don't let in guests. So they didn't want to let anybody in. So he said, so you're worried about me, aren't you? Because I have guests. He says, don't worry about it. It's because I have 2 daughters I got to marry off. As long as I have the 2 daughters, they're not married, so I got to be nice, because I have to have a good reputation. But don't worry, my fellow Sodom citizens, as soon as I marry them off, I'll go back to being the same cheapo that you guys are. I'll fit right in, I'll stop doing Hachnosas Orchim, and that's it. So he had to do it in order to get his 2 daughters married off. And as they state in the Chazon Yeshayahu. So he says the same thing over here by Yisro. What happened by Yisro? Says Rashi, looks at the pasuk. If the daughters were melumin and Hachnosas Orchim, they would have invited Moshe in. So why didn't invite Moshe in? Why did they say something? Why did they say, you can come for a meal, come to our house? After he did us this enormous favor. I mean, he saved them. He did this big favor. And nothing. Because they had never seen Hachnosas Orchim in the house of Yisro. They didn't know what it was. So Yisro had to tell them, this is different, invite him in. Why? Because maybe he'll marry one of you. And that's how Rashi knew it. Valtik, isn't that? Valtik of Shah. That it said, Yisro, they weren't used to it. So therefore they had to yell at them, why? You got to invite him in. Says Rashi, all of a sudden, he's getting to be a Machnas Arach. The daughters knew nothing about it. They didn't know how to behave like that. The answer is he wanted to marry off his daughters. So I was thinking to myself, we come back to the Tzfardim, we come back to the frogs, and we know that when a Rasha does something, and it's cruel to a Yid, Rahman al-San, cruel to another person, he's punished for being cruel. The Mitzrayim were punished for everything they did bad to the Yidden, to the torment and the torture and the boys, everything that they did, they were punished for. But you know something? You think that the Rosh is only punished for what he did bad? No. Says Hashem, the Tzfardoim show that he's punished even because he didn't do good. Not just he did bad to Yidden, but he missed the opportunity to do good to them. So we go and we take a look and say, how do you do good to somebody? You invite them into your house. So Hashem says, you didn't invite them into your house. You're going to have Tzfardoim. You give them a bedroom, you give them a place to sleep. That's how you take care of a guest. Hashem says, you're going to be punished, you have your frogs in there. You say, my servants, your servants won't be able to be mishamish them. Your oven that you bake for them, your kneading trowel that you knead the dough so you can give them bread. Frogs everywhere. So Hashem is mefaret in this pasuk, each one, to show that you're going to be punished not just because you were bad to the Jews, but because you weren't good to the Jews either. There's a double sword going on. There's a double punishment. There's a double ra. There's a nachmu ami, right? Because you did averas. So there's 2 parts of an avera. Part 1 of every avera is that you did the avera. But part 2 is in that hour that you did the avera, you could have been doing a mitzvah. That's why it says that a Yid is punished double, kiflayim, katosechem. So here also it shows by the Tzfardoim, they were punished because in the house, in the bedroom, they were punished in the kitchen, they were punished in the servants. All the things that could have done good, and they didn't, they're punished for that also. So we see that we should all keep in mind that every opportunity we have to be a machnas eirach, every opportunity we have to do a chesed, and we don't, and we do something bad, kiflayim, there's a punishment for that, chas v'shalom. But we Yidden aren't like that. We're not like the Mitzrayim. We Yidden look for every opportunity to do chesed, every opportunity to help another person, every opportunity to be there for other people. So we should learn the lesson. We're going to be laning in Mitzvah Shem. We're going to listen to the laning this Shabbos, and we're going to the Tzvardoim. And when you get to that pasuk, say to yourself, why does it say all these pratim? You can just say they'll be in your house. That's enough. It's got to go down to the level of your ovens and your kneading troughs and your bedrooms. Why? The answer is because they were punished for not doing good for the Yid. And Salavai, we should be Zoiche, always to do good for other people, always to have that ability to think good, think chesed. We should make a big sign, think chesed, put up on your door, think chesed on the wall. And Baruch Hashem, the Zayda, the Azhar of a Rebbe, along with his ga'inus, his incredible ga'inus in Torah, as we said, 23 svarim, 600 pages minimum, that's 12,000 pages or more. All of those svarim, gadus b'Torah. But there was also, if you read and you listen and you hear the stories of the chesed he did for everybody, how he helped so many thousands of people wherever I go. It's amazing. 50 years later, I meet people. Yes, my grandfather knew the Zayd, and he always talked about him, and my grandmother, and they went for brachas, and they were nitzel, and they were saved. So many things we learned from the Azhar Rebbe, from the Zayda, and he should be Meilitz Yosher for all of us. He should be the Mishpacha. These are rough times in Klal Yisrael. He should be there for all of us, thinking about us, carrying on, davening for us, helping us. Eber's the Holfen, Tei Nishmas Tzur B'Tzar Chaim. He should always be attacked. It says, Nar hoyisi gam zakanti v'loriisi tzadik nezav. That's, you go through, it's 50 years. So many, those people who were children and young at the time of his petira are now zakenim, but they see that the tzaddik always continues, the hashpah of the tzaddik. Tzaddikim misasim kruyin chaim, tzaddikim even when they're not alive are called alive, because their hashpah continues in their dairis and their talmidim and all of Klal Yisrael. A good Shabbos.